We're now moving on to our final story. It was just a couple nights ago or so. We went through the interview that Jimmy Dore had with RFK Jr. And during that interview, he admitted that he would interview with Max Blumenthal. If you have forgotten, let's go back and revisit that. So here's Max Blumenthal saying, here's RFK Jr. saying, my reporting on Israel and Palestine needs to be questioned, and agreeing to a public dialogue with me on this issue. So for those who may have forgotten, let's dive in.
I love Max Blumenthal, but I do not think he's objective on Israel. I think his reporting on Israel is not, it needs to be questioned.
Okay, well, here's what I would ask. Just like, you know, Peter Hotez ducked you and Joe Rogan, I would love, because Max is the guy to talk to about this, not me. So would you do an interview with Max, because he would be able to talk to you about this way better than I can. I'm really not good at this.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Max. I love Max Blumenthal.
Okay, so we all remember that. I'd love to talk to Max. So he was put on the spot there. Apparently shortly after that, and Max revealed this on Rising, but he has gone into more detail recently, so that'll be interesting. Apparently after that, things changed. Surprise! So Max tweeted this out. A day after RFK Jr. agreed to Jimmy Dore's proposal to publicly discuss his pledge of unconditional support for Israel with me, his comms director was dialing me up to offer a series of unbelievable excuses for why this could not happen in the foreseeable future. Now, before I get into this article where he dives into this pretty deeply, I just want to show you this. She's pretty much blocked anyone who disagrees with his position on Israel and Palestine. And by blocked, I mean she is basically shielding RFK Jr. from outlets that do disagree with him on this particular issue. It's not just Max. And I know Max's story is getting a lot of attention because RFK Jr. was asked that publicly on Jimmy's show, but it's not just happening to Max. It's happening to a lot of us. And I've talked about this as well. Stephanie Spear is the comms director. I have also spoken to her via email. I've also spoken on the phone with other people that are a part of RFK Jr.'s campaign. They called me, by the way. And this is an issue. And so I'm going to go ahead and say this. Now, the title of this article, this is the Gray Zone article, RFK Jr. staff blocked Israel-Palestine dialogue after the candidate agreed. Neoliberal Tears pointed out something to my attention that I think needs to be said. Even though Stephanie Spear is the comms director, yes, she is part of the staff, and she is the one saying no. At the end of the day, she works for RFK Jr. So if he had issue with the way that she is performing, he can either ask her to change what she is doing, or he can replace her with someone else. But at the end of the day, she works for him. So keep this in mind. If this is something that RFK Jr. wants to do wholeheartedly, he can go around her and do it anyway, especially since he knows Max Blumenthal. They actually know each other. Now let's get into the article, and then I'm going to tell you the update that happened on Jimmy's show earlier. A day after RFK Jr. agreed to a public discussion with Max Blumenthal on Israel and Palestine, his campaign walked back his words. RFK Jr. has pledged unconditional support to Israel while spouting vitriolic anti-Palestinian rhetoric. So let's get into this. One day after Democratic presidential candidate RFK Jr. agreed to comedian and podcaster Jimmy Dore's proposal that he engage with the Gray Zone's editor-in-chief Max Blumenthal in a public dialogue on Israel and Palestine, Kennedy's campaign nixed the discussion. Nixed. It's big for you guys there. During an August 1st phone call with Gray Zone correspondent Liam Cosgrove, RFK Jr. campaign communications director Stephanie Spear declared Kennedy's not debating Max Blumenthal. He's not going to debate anyone. He's running for president. So essentially, this is similar to what happened between Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., and Peter Hotez. When Joe Rogan offered to moderate a debate between RFK Jr. and Peter Hotez, I called him Lab Coat Guy. RFK Jr. agreed to that discussion. Peter Hotez was like, yeah, I'll debate this guy on this, and then totally backed out. So he's now done the same thing. But according to Stephanie Spears, he's not going to debate anyone. But he publicly said he would debate Peter Hotez. Let's continue. She goes on to say, "You're not hearing me," she emphasized. "We're not going to do it, okay?" There are some gatekeepers sometimes in political spaces that are part of these campaigns where sometimes like you may have reached out to a candidate's team to interview them and that candidate has no idea because the gatekeeper preventing that information from getting to the candidate. However, with RFK Jr., that doesn't seem to be the case. He knows. He knows. Let's continue. Hours after her call with Cosgrove, Spear contacted Blumenthal directly to explain that Kennedy would not agree to any public discussion with the Gray Zone editor until spring of 2024, once the first 5 primaries are over. You see this? The Gray Zone editor until spring of 2024, once the first 5 primaries are over. Now, why would that be the case? Because they don't want him to engage in a discussion that could potentially show that he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to this particular issue and could hurt his campaign. That's what this is really about. Now, they had no problem. Stephanie had no problem with RFK Jr. going on to breaking points multiple times. Had no problem with Crystal Ball pushing back on him in reference to the jab. Had no problem with RFK Jr. appearing on Rising multiple times. By the way, Bree had this discussion with him about Israel and Palestine on Rising. But for some reason, they do not want him to have this conversation with the Gray Zone. Very interesting. She offered Blumenthal an off-the-record phone conversation with the candidate as an apparent consolation. Off-the-record conversation. What are they so afraid of, guys? I'm supposed to believe that RFK Jr. is going to take on the CIA and he's going to take on the military-industrial complex and he's afraid to talk to Max Blumenthal? Though Blumenthal never insisted on a formal debate, but rather a live interview, such as the ones Kennedy has granted popular media figures like Dorr, Glenn Greenwald, and Breonna Joy Gray. Speer repeatedly stated that the candidate would not debate anyone except the president of the United States until the first presidential primaries are over. You guys hear this? So let me tell you something. I told you I had already spoken to a member of his campaign who made it very clear to me that the woman who was always with him, the comms director, that's Stephanie, she's the one that makes the interviews possible. So even some of the people on his campaign team are having difficulty having a sit down with her. She's not just avoiding people on the outside, she's avoiding people as part of the campaign. That's how this works, ladies and gentlemen. We're hitting different demographics, and we're also hitting on different issues, Speer emphasized. So you know, it's really a strategy thing. And we want to debate President Biden. He's a Democratic candidate. That's what we're waiting for. So you can't give Max an interview? This June, however, Kennedy enthusiastically accepted podcaster Joe Rogan's offer to participate in a live debate with Peter Hotez, a pediatrician and one of the country's most precocious. Did I say precocious? Ferocious? Vocicarious? Whatever, shoot. Of the jab. Rogan pledged to donate $100,000 to a charity of Hotez's choice if the doctor entered the octagon. Hotez, who provoked Rogan's challenge by accusing him and RFK of misinfo, invited widespread mockery and scorn when he refused to debate. But now RFK is refusing to engage on an issue that he recently placed at the heart of his campaign and which has shocked many supporters who believed he offered an alternative to the pro-war bipartisan consensus, his unconditional support for the state of Israel and its military conduct in the occupied Palestinian territories. It's one thing you publicly say on someone's show, yeah, I'll do it. And then right after that, the comms director says, yeah, it's not happening. Now, I do want to give you a recent update. Apparently, I watched the conversation between Max and Jimmy earlier before I went live. And on that show, Jimmy said that he received a text from RFK, and RFK said he will do it. He will talk to Max. But his communications director told Max no. And why is RFK not communicating with Max Blumenthal directly? Instead of putting Jimmy in the middle, why isn't RFK reaching out to Max and saying, I know what you heard, but I'll go ahead and do the interview. I do want to do the discussion with you. What is happening here? What kind of buffoonery is this? Like, honestly, at this point, and people do whatever they want. But at this point, if I was Max, I'd honestly look at RFK and say, fuck you. I wouldn't even want to have this discussion now. That's just me. Because I don't, you got three tries. Like with me, you got three, that's it. You got three. After that, I'm not even trying to reach out to you. No. Let's go on. During his conversation with Kennedy's communication director, Cosgrove challenged Speer on the candidate's sudden timidity. RFK goes on all these interviews and says that he wants to debate people. So I'm a bit confused about why he says that and you guys don't want to debate. Is it your decision or is it him saying that? It's the campaign's decision, Liam. That's coming from Stephanie. He did not ask for a debate with Max. she continued in an annoyed tone. So maybe re-listen to that. We're not going to debate. I don't know how many times I have to tell you that. Well, that seems quite rude. This is what's happening on his campaign team? There's a post here from Post-Duopolis. It says, and it shows that video where he agrees to debate. We showed that. He goes on to say RFK Jr. has sought to define himself as the strongest peace and freedom candidate in 2 decades while denouncing neocons and warmongers. At the same time, he has zealously defended the conduct of Israel's military and justified the country's decade-long occupation of Palestinians, even denying that any military occupation exists. Kennedy placed his Lukidnick views on Israel and Palestine at the forefront of his campaign message after being bombarded with accusations of anti-Semitism stemming from comments he made at a private July 14th event in New York City. Actually, I saw this as the forefront of his campaign message actually before that when he was in that parade. That was the first time I saw it, actually. Anywho, we know about what happened at that dinner. And be careful with that because you need no YouTube. This part here. When a New York Post reported who had been presented with the dinner published the candidate's comments, a maelstrom of manufactured outbursts forth from Kennedy's opponents with Democratic establishment, while the Biden White House and a host of Jewish pressure groups condemned Kennedy as an anti-Semite. A letter signed by 100 Democratic members of Congress likened him to Adolf Hitler. So that was when he had that private discussion, which was apparently not so private after all. And that was leaked. And he was saying that there were some people who would have an effect from the jab differently than others. I want to get in all of that. We got to be careful. Let's move on here. That's the weaponization committee. We've talked about that before. I want to go into let me see. Kennedy's escalated his warlike rhetoric during a July 23rd New York City event hosted by Shmuley Botek, a former reality show rabbi recruited by the late Likudnik oligarch Sheldon Adelson to advance the cause of Greater Israel within the United States. Adelson was a top funder of Donald Trump's 2016 and 2020 campaigns. During a 20-minute long diatribe, and we interviewed the protesters, laden with anti-Palestinian venom and ultra-Zionist propaganda, Kennedy referred to hijabs as habibs and pronounced Chechnya as though he had not heard of the place until moments before the event. While pledging to prevent any country in the Middle East from obtaining nuclear weapons as president, the candidate seemed unaware that Israel possessed a secret nuclear arsenal. And that was this video here.
I don't think I have ever heard a major American political figure express so kaleidoscopically support for Israel in the historical context as what we just heard. That was unprecedented.
And I don't know why RFK Jr. has aligned himself with this guy. This guy was on a reality TV show called Shalom in the Home. He also wrote a book about Michael Jackson after he died. He was connected to people like Michael Jackson. I feel like this guy just wants to be seen. I don't think it was a good idea for him to connect his campaign with him.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even have words. That a man who just said that could be called an anti-Semite. Honestly, I just don't have words. I mean, you're challenging an entire party right now to almost go back to the roots. So let's talk about that for a moment. What is your connection to Israel? What do you think about Israel? And what do you think about the Democratic Party's posture vis-a-vis Israel?
Grew up believing that the state of Israel was this extraordinary, blossom in the desert. It was an oasis of democracy, of values, of human rights in a midst of sea of totalitarianism. And I made that assumption. I assumed that my children would feel the same way. I was shocked in recent years that my kids coming home from college had a very different narrative about Israel that they had picked up from their, from the Gestalt, from the milieu. And that narrative is the narrative that has been adopted in recent years by the Democratic Party, which sees Israel as an occupying nation, an imperium, oppressing indigenous Palestinians. And
why would you be shocked by that? See, this is the thing to me that realized that he really was not doing his research.
as you know, as a racist state and an apartheid state. And, part of my campaign is going to be a major piece of it is going to be explaining to American citizens why that view is wrong and making them.
It's terrible. Like, this is terrible.
Moral case for Israel. Israel, as you know, is the only place in the Mideast where there's freedom of expression for all citizens.
No, it's not. I'm not going to play this whole thing. It's not for all people. It's for certain people. It's definitely not for the Palestinians. They don't even have freedom to walk around in certain parts of the country. Anyhow, going on, as Shmuley nodded along, Kennedy launched a full-throated defense of the Israeli army's brigade-size invasion of the occupied Palestinian city of Jenin, during which it bombed buildings with fighter jets and ran bulldozers through the middle of its refugee camp. He referred to the entire city as a bomb factory, justifying the invasion because, in his words, virtually 100% of the people there are supporting terrorism. According to Kennedy, everybody in Jenin is involved in bomb making. There are no civilians there at all. Therefore, all are legitimate targets. He did not seem to know that the Palestinian campaign of suicide bombing ended well over 15 years ago, or that Israel's primary concern in Jenin was with the proliferation of armed militias defending their territory from settler and military incursions. The half-baked Hasbara escalated from there, as Kennedy cited Richard Kemp, a former British Army officer who subsists on Israel lobby speaking fees, to claim the conduct of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, when they go into Palestinian territories is beyond anything in the world. He even insisted that Israel's policy is to avoid civilian casualties, ignoring the moonscapes it created out of entire neighborhoods from Gaza to Beirut. And what's really interesting to me is that RFK Jr. has had this discussion with multiple people. RFK Jr., could have had this discussion with multiple people that he's already spoken to. He could have had this discussion with Kim Iverson, who was actually there at the Gaza Strip. Max Blumenthal was at the Gaza Strip. There are other people who have reported on this issue for years. And I just feel like you can't say, I'm running for president, but I'm not going to talk to people about this issue. You can't do that. And I don't know what the switch up strategy is that they're trying to do, but telling people that you're going to talk to them on someone's show and then the comms director contacting them and telling them, no, we're not going to do it. That's not a good look. I hope that's not part of the strategy. This part right here. During his live interview with Kennedy on Jimmy Dore show, the comedian challenges unconditional support for Israel. You don't even give America unconditional support, Dore reminded the candidate. Kennedy responded with a recitation of the same Zionist talking points he spouted while seated next to Shmuley. Among the litany of easily debunked claims Kennedy rattled off was that the U.S.-funded Palestinian Authority, which coordinates directly with the Israeli government, pays bounties for the killings of Jews anywhere on the planet. Yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one. Jesus. It's bad. Next, during the cliched and clumsy attempt at chronicling Israel's miraculous survival, Kennedy falsely claimed that following the 1967 war, Syria got the Golan Heights and the Sinai back once it recognized Israel's right to exist. In fact, the Golan Heights is still illegally occupied by Israel and is home of a settlement, Trump Heights, named for the U.S. president who pledged to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the area. See, this is the stuff that, like, some of the things that he's saying, it's just, where is he getting the information from? And here's an example here where it says, as for the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt liberated its territory from Israel's occupation through a surprise military campaign in 1973. And you'll see the picture here. Trump Heights, Israel approves plan for occupied Golan settlement.
בנוכחות ידיד גדול של מדינת ישראל.
Wow, man.
נתחיל היום צעדים מעשיים להעלות את היישוב רמת טראמפ ברמת הגולן, שעל הריבונות שלה בידי ישראל הכיר הנשיא טראמפ.
Well. Jeez. It's like, did he look up any of this information before he said? Trump signed an executive order in March 2019, recognizing it as Israeli territory. You guys see that? Oh man. That's why I'm just like, and then there's one other part I want to show you here. Again, this is where it says, I love Max Blumenthal, but I do not think he's objective on Israel. His reporting on Israel, it needs to be questioned. And then Dor responded, okay, here's what I ask. Just like Peter Hotez ducked you and Joe Rogan, I would love, because Max is the guy to talk to about this, not me. Would you do an interview with Max? Because he would be able to talk to you about this way better than I can. Yeah, I would love to talk to Max, Kennedy said in a seemingly sincere tone. Within 24 hours, however, his communications director was frantically explaining why no such conversation will take place. And then you'll see, if we go back up towards the top, just the rhetoric that came from her. Listen to this. It's the campaign's decision, Liam. He did not ask for a debate with Max. So maybe re-listen to that. We're not going to debate. I don't know how many times I have to tell you that. Yikes. I don't know, man. That's just, but I'll just say this. At this point in time, and I do understand that Max does want to have this conversation with him, but in my opinion, I would just let it go at this point. You should not have to fight this hard to have a discussion with someone. And I think it's because, like, there are parts of his campaign, there are aspects of RFK Jr.'s campaign that Max does like, and he has applauded. And maybe he feels like if he can get him to understand where he's wrong on this issue, then maybe that will make his campaign better. But here's my thing. I don't think RFK Jr. is going to change his position on this issue. I think it's too late. He's already got people attached to him and to the campaign that have this same view and want him to promote this view. So if he walks back now, that's not going to be good for his campaign. Either way, he's screwed. Put it this way. Either this way. But during that show, Jimmy did say that RFK Jr. texted him and said he will talk to Max Blumenthal. But again, like I said, that should be just have direct communication with Max Blumenthal. Just reach out to Max directly yourself and don't use someone else in the middle as the middleman. Because let me tell you what happens to the middleman. If shit don't work out, people come looking back at you. That's the thing. People come looking back at you like, I thought you said that he said that this was going to happen. That's why it's no fun being in the middle. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from experience. And people be like, can I talk to this person? Reach out directly to them. Because I don't know. I don't have time. Reach out directly to that person. But I don't know. We'll see. But if it were me, I'd just be like, bye.